Welcome to this Pastel My Business online webinar. This webinar will show you how to invite your accountant and give him or her access to your company. We will cover the processing of journals, tax payments, refunds, and adjustments.
Today we are looking at the accountants area. Now, I will throughout the session keep referring to having the supervision or discussing with your accountant and or auditor or bookkeeper, whoever is in charge of your journal adjustments and so forth. So I will be making reference to that quite constantly throughout the session. But ideally, guys, is we have an accountant's area. Now, these are specific responsibilities that any business entity would need an accountant for, where they would need to do adjustments, be it adjustments for specific accounts or tax adjustments, and also printing specific audit reports and tax-related reports. So we've grouped all this information and put it under the accountant's area specifically for them to have access to that. But if you're self-sufficient, you're confident enough, and basically what I'm going to be doing in this session, just giving you an overview of the accountant's area, not to go into much detail, but just to make you more comfortable so that you know what information is there and make you more self-sufficient and have the access and the functionality for you to be able to do it yourself. So, guys, just to kick us off then, is the accountant's area, as I said, it's just solely for those journal adjustments and also to do all your tax processing and so forth. Now, make sure, as I said, that run it by your accountant, auditor, bookkeeper, and so forth, just to make sure that you're on track with whatever processing that you need to do in this area. Now, the first area that I'm going to take you through under the accountant's area is the process journal entries. Now, the process journal entries, by simply selecting that option, is there for you to do adjustments. Now, these are adjustments for your accounts. Now, these are the accounts that you would have created to process your accounts into. So your accounts like your expense accounts, your motor vehicles accounts, your profit and loss type of accounts, and also your assets and liabilities type of accounts like your liabilities and so forth. I'm going to try and steer away from the accounting jargon in terms of using your financial categories and debits and credits and so forth, and you'll see why through this application, because we've steered away from that, just to simplify the application. So we've steered away from the debits and credits and rather referring to transaction adjustments as increases and decreases based on what sort of accounts you want to affect. Now, processing journal entries, as I said, is for you to do journal entries to affect specific ledger accounts. Now, these accounts is excluding your customers, excluding your suppliers, excluding your items, and also excluding your bank accounts. It is specific to your accounts that you would have created. As I said, expense and income and so forth. Those are those type of accounts. Now, taking you through the journal entry screen, which is what I'm currently on. The first option you have there is to show previous journal entries. Now, by simply selecting that option, PASA will update and look at previous transactions that have been processed via this option of journal entries. As you can see, I've only got one typical entry that I've processed, which is what I'll take you through. Now, the other reason why you would also have this functionality to show your previous entries is to enable you to do your recurring journal. So if you're paying rates and water every single month, you can see the previous entries and process the entry exactly like that for the months going forward. So it's just there for recurring journals. It's there for you to also edit the transactions. I can simply go into this line and simply change the values or change the accounts that it's affecting. So you can also edit the transactions here. Now, as I said, we are steering away from the whole debit and credit scenario. Therefore, we're looking at effects of accounts. Now, if you're selecting the option to show journal entries, then the next option that becomes available are the filters. What date ranges do you want to see the journal entries for? Well, this would be history. So what previous journal entries do you want to see? I've only selected today's date in there, but you can go back by simply clicking on the calendar. You can go back into last month, 2 months back, and so forth, depending on what sort of information you're looking for. And once you've selected the date ranges, Pastel will then update and give you the information that has been processed by journal entries in that chronological sequence. Now, just taking you through this typical example that I have of my previous transaction that I've done, that I've processed, is the first option will give you the date, which will always default to the current date for a brand new journal entry that you are doing. But obviously for history, it will take you to the transaction, to the date that the transaction was done. Then it will take you through the effect of the transaction. Are you increasing or are you decreasing a specific account? Select the option that you want to choose here, and as you see, I've selected the option to increase. And which account am I effectively increasing? I am increasing my electricity and water account. Then the next option is the reference. Now the reference is a compulsory field. You need to specify a reference here. For the accountant's auditing purposes, they need to have reference numbers so they can check the sequencing of their transactions. And also it's for internal purposes, like if it was initially a check payment that you need to make an adjustment for, then you would use that as a reference number. So make sure that the reference number has been populated, and yes, it is in there. The next column is the description. Now, description is there for you to detail what this transaction or this adjustment is for. I am adjusting the payment that we made to Johannesburg Water, so I will put in the description there. The amounts that I'm doing the journal adjustment for, and this would be the other leg of the transaction. Now, for the accounts that are, or for the accountants that are listening today, that have joined me this morning, that by affecting the accounts, this would be the contra account or the other leg of the transaction. Now, the accountants will understand more better if I say that for every debit there is a credit. So we have simply said by affecting which account. So you need to specify the accounts that you need to affect. And for the sake of this example, I've used the bank loans expense account. So the bank loans expense account will then be decreased and the electricity and water accounts will then be increased. Then we have the tax type. Selecting the tax type. Is tax applicable on this transaction? Yes or no? And then it tax, depending on whether tax is applicable, yes or no, it will show you the VAT inclusive value there. And then we've got the two options on the right, to add additional lines or to delete or remove transactions or a specific line from the journal entry. Now the journal entry is done, the next thing you need to do is click on process. Now all journal transactions are being processed, they're not simply being done, so they are being processed. So I'm going to quickly select on the process option. It will take me out of this window. Alternatively, if I click on process and new, then it's going to bring me back to this window where I can then process another journal entry should I need to. Now, first and foremost, most importantly, is that your accountant would need to have access to your Pastel My Business Online. And this was previously covered at our very first session where we discussed creating companies and also managing your users. So make sure that your accountant has been added as a user, they've activated their profile, they will get a link on their email, they've activated their profile, and they have full access. And we have also discussed previously how you can limit access that your accountant has. Now this takes care of our journal entries. Now we move over to our tax payments and refunds. Now, as I said, these are your tax payments and refunds. By simply clicking on that option, it will bring you to a a summary of what your input and output tax would be. Now, here we are referring to input and output tax, which ideally your accountant, auditor, and so forth will understand. Basically, your output tax, that would be your total tax values that have affected your sales amount. And your input tax would be all the tax implication on all transactions based on all the purchases, all the goods that you've purchased. Then on this summary, you need to firstly specify the date ranges, always filtering for what sort of date ranges you want to see the tax payments and refunds for, and then it will detail the summary for you. Now, to show you details as well of these transactions now, I want to see details of the output tax, that sales value of 104,291. Now, if I want to see details of this, I can then go view my profit and loss report or other reports that we will be covering under the accountants area. So just to see what makes up the total value. There we go. We've got the summary, and the difference between the output and input tax will give you our total tax payable or refund that we need to claim from the tax authorities. And then on the detail at the bottom of the window is, are we making a payment or are we making a refund? So to save you from going through multiple windows to process this tax payment, it's here. You can do it right here. It's convenient, and the balance is actually there for you. So by simply clicking whether you're making a payment to the tax authorities or you're claiming a refund from the tax authorities, you select the necessary option, choose the date that you are making the payment, and since this payment is affecting your bank, you then need to specify the bank that it's affecting. Provide a reference number. As I said, all reference numbers are compulsory in the application, so specify the reference number here. Details of the transaction, be it payment to SARS or whatever tax authority that you are making, specify the description, and the amount will automatically populate based on the difference of the above summary output less your input tax. And here you can change the value as well. So if you want to pay it in different portions, you can then allocate 4,000 this week, and next week pay the balance or whatever the case is. So it's there for you, and the last option that's available is to click on the process button and the transaction is done. As you can see, the reference field is compulsory throughout the application. It will give you an error message or a notification window coming up, as you can see on the screen. So you just need to specify the reference number, specify the description of the transaction, and you click on process. And now once the processing is done, the transaction has gone through your bank, be it money going out of the bank as a payment to the tax authorities or money coming into the bank as a refund from the tax authorities. And that in a nutshell takes care of our tax payments and also our refunds. The next option we have under the accountants area is the tax adjustment. Now simply put, the tax adjustment is simply there to adjust your input and your output tax. Now you do here again need to have your accountants, your auditor and so forth. You need to have them authorizing this tax adjustments. Ideally, you'd like to have them do these adjustments for you. But ideally, it's just a simple transaction. Am I adjusting my input tax or am I adjusting my output tax? Specify the description of the transaction, the date, the amount, click on process. Pastel does the rest. Pastel will then go into the back end and do the adjustments accordingly for your input and your output tax. And bear in mind that all transactions being processed, whether it's tax adjustments, whether it is transactions being created or edited in any way, or even deleted, all these transactions are saved in our audit trail report, which I'll briefly take you through when we go through the audit trail report. Now there it is. That's your tax adjustments. It is done, and it gives you a nice synopsis of what the tax adjustment is ideally there for. And then we have our reports. Before we get to reports, I'd actually like to end off with the reports. So I'll go back to the reports because there's a couple of reports that I want to go into a bit more detail on. Let's look at our last option there, which is the trial balance export. Now the trial balance export allows the accountant or yourself the ability to export your complete trial balance into a CSV format, which is a Excel file, and you can obviously do your changes accordingly. And also with the export functionality, it gives you the flexibility to add account numbers to your account. So if you've got an account like yourself and you are using or you've been maybe previously exposed to Pastel Partner, Pastel Express, Evolution and so forth, any of our other Pastel Suites packages, then you would be used to the idea of having a specific account number allocated to a specific ledger or account. Let me refer to it as an account. So to do this, you'd simply go to the trial balance export. I'd simply select that option, and it will then take me through the filters of what sort of trial balance am I trying to export. Am I exporting it for the year, for the month, from live to date, or is it from this year or last year? Do I want to see closing balances, or do I want to see movements for the specified periods? And it gives you a nice synopsis of what the trial balance is based on in terms of your cost of sales and so forth. Now the next option is for you to simply export the data or assign account numbers. Now if I simply click on that export data, then there it is. My trial balance is a CSV file. Do I want to save it? Do I want to open it? And by simply opening it, you will notice that it will take us to Excel, and there's my Excel trial balance exported, and all the balances are there, which is quite awesome, quite easy to work with, and you've got full access functionality at this point. You can do any additional changes at this point, put in additional formulas, or work with the information that you have. So it's quite neat. Pastel does it for you. I don't need to save that report. Then, as I said earlier, is you can also assign account numbers. Also, the functionality for this is for you to have the ability to import into any other accounting application. So if your accountant is using Caseware or Pastel Auditor, then you can simply assign account numbers to each and every single account that you've created. And when you export the trial balance, then it will export the account number accordingly. Now I'll make a very basic example. To those of you that are quite familiar with Pastel Partner or Pastel Express or even Evolution, I'll just use a very typical example of the account number. The very first line on the list of accounts looks at my AXA. Now it's an AXA bank account, and I've used the account number 8400/000 as the account number. So once I've allocated all the account numbers for my accounts in here and clicked on the save button, when I then export the trial balance, it will show the account number, what the account number is, which is APSA, and obviously the balance as of a specific period. So it's there. Then you can simply import into your auditing software or your accounting applications, and the information is there. It's done, and Pastel has taken care of that for you. You can always come back into this window and change the account numbers as you see fit or as and when required. And that takes care of our trial balance export. Lastly, guys, I'm going to take you through the reports. Now, these reports are ideally for the accountant. This is what your accountant would like to see when they are going through your books and doing their audits and so forth. So these are just a list of typical reports that the accountants would like to have a look at to assist them in obviously assisting you and reporting on your business. By simply selecting the reports option, it takes me to the next window, which gives me a list of all the reports that are currently available. Now these are the reports that we have available to the accountants. We have the trial balance. We have just looked at exporting the trial balance into a CSV format, but here you can print the trial balance. I'll take you through that shortly. We have a report for the opening balances and tax reports. Also on the right hand side, giving you a description or synopsis of what the report will detail or what information is in this report. We have an audit trail. As I said previously, the audit trail is simply there to have a look at who's done what in the application and just keep track of that, of the changes and so forth that are done in the application. You've got your tax report. You've got your tax payments and refunds, keeping track of all the payments that you've done to your tax authorities or refunds that have been claimed from your tax authorities. And lastly, you've got your tax audit report. Now, the first report I'm going to take you through briefly, and probably the only report that I will view with you on screen, so you can see a typical example of what it looks like, is your trial balance. I'm going to click on the trial balance link. Now you'll see here that the filters or the options for the trial balance are quite similar to the exporting of the trial balance options that we have. You can either run this report, a yearly, monthly, live to date would be from the time that you effectively started using Pastel My Business Online. From the time you started using our Pastel application, it will pull through all the information up until today's current state, which would be your system date accordingly. So you have that option, or you can run it monthly. I want to run it only for the month of December, or I want to run it for the month of March. Alternatively, you can run it also for the year, viewing it either for this year or last year. I'm going to select for the sake of today's session this year. On the bottom, it gives us a further filter of what do you want to see. Now, Pastel gives you two options, right? Do you want to see closing balances, which means that you want to include your opening balances from the previous period or from the previous financial year. So it will pull through those opening balances going forward, plus all the transactions, giving you the closing balance as at the current period. Alternatively, you want to see movement. Now, movement says remove the closing balances. I want to see all the transactions, rather the net effect of all the transactions that have taken place within this year. So I want to see if this year there's been some movement in my ledger accounts, or I want to see what the closing balances would be. I'm going to select the closing balances, and I'm on the options that we have here. The printing options is to view the report on screen, print the report, sending it to the printer, and also exporting it to the different options, and also emailing the report through, which would then be a case where your accountant would then email the report to yourself, or you would then email the report to the accountant for them to go through, and obviously you need to go in and make the necessary changes should the need arise. But for the sake of this session, I'm going to view the report on screen, just to take you through a typical example of what the report looks like. Now it brings us to our trial balance, which is awesome. It's quite cool. It displays in a very neat fashion. It displays the report for you. And what you will also notice, which is an awesome functionality, is that you can drill down on these specific figures. So I can see I've got a sales amount of 38,000. I can simply click on that sales, and it will drill down to what makes up that amount of the sales, which is an awesome functionality. It's a drill down functionality. It's pervasive throughout the application based on specific reports that you're running. There we go. It takes me to the report that I'm running for my sales, and it will show me the cumulative value of what makes up my sales amount of that 38,000. Just to take you through it. And there's the report for you, and you will see that the grand total reconciles to the trial balance amount. And if you need to go back, you simply click on the back arrow with using your full Internet Explorer functionality, which would then take me back to the trial balance. Now the trial balance will give you the name of the company on the left hand side, on the right hand side the date ranges that you've specified on all the filters, how many pages this report is, and thereafter the details of what you want to see. Now looking at the printing options on top, you can either do a search here, you can email this report by simply clicking on the envelope to email the report. You can send this report to the printer. You can also print the current page, whereas you are printing the current page that you're working on. So if your trial balance is 5 pages and you're on page number 3 and you only want to print page number 3, then you can just simply click on that option. You've got your navigating windows, your back and forth buttons. It tells you the number of pages you have, and you've got the options to save. You can save the reports, you can export the reports and save it onto a disk, onto a file, into your computer, and so forth. You also have the different formats. Now, if you're saving this report or exporting this report, it will always export based on the format that you've selected on the right-hand side. Now, the typical formats that we have, you can create the report to PDF, Excel, rich text, and so forth. So these are the options that you have here to export the report, and which is constant throughout all the reports that you would be viewing in the application. And that takes us through the accountants area this morning. Just going through some of the other filters of the accountants area reports, the opening balances and tax adjustment report. This report would show you transactions making up the opening balance and tax adjustments. So by simply clicking on that link, it will take me through a filter. At what date do you want to see the report for? Let's view the report as of today's date. Then it will show me all my opening balances that have been created for all my accounts, customers, bank accounts. Everything is detailed in this report. And as you can see on top, you've got all the printing options, which is pervasive throughout the application. Very awesome report, easy to access so that you know where the problems are coming in. And that would take care of your opening balances and tax adjustment report. Your audit trail report, very powerful utility. Pastel keeps track of everything that has been done in the application, be it transaction was created, transaction was edited, and or transaction was deleted. And it can also give you the option to see who did it, be it your accountant or was it yourself or any one of your users if you've given your additional users to use the application. Excuse me. Now on this audit trail report, you need to specify the date range. I'm going to go back a couple of months back to months that have good history. I want to see the user that did the transaction. So I'm going to simply check that box and I click on the view report. Now Pastel will run through the report and there it is. It will show you that there was an account that was created. So it's always under the event column. The date it was created, the time it was created, looking at your system time, the reference number that was entered on that transaction, the transaction date, and the value of the transaction. And then at the bottom it will show you the user. Now the user will be obviously the email address which would have logged in and created that. And you will also notice that for system generated ones, it's a recurring profile, like that's recurring profile, which means I've got recurring invoices that were automatically done by the system. Very, very powerful utility. It's there. The accountants would love this. You would love this for you to keep track of what is happening, who's done what on your Pastel My Business online. So guys, it's there. I mean, it's really up to you. You can view the reports, email the reports, exactly the same filters that you have on all other reports. Now, just to take you through 2 other reports, we've got our tax report, which would be tax transactions. If you want to see all the transactions that have tax on them, just for you to make up what makes up your input and your output tax and what makes up the value total payable or refundable to you from the tax authorities. So you can view your tax report. Obviously there'll be filters there which you'll need to go through and select, and then Pastel will then detail all the transactions that have tax to them. You would specify the tax types and go through all the filters as you can see on the screen that I have. Now, which is what another option which is quite cool on the tax report, which now you should have access to. Just to recap, is the filters. You specify the tax type, which transactions do you want to see. So you specify the tax type. I want to see only 14% transactions. For the date range is specified. Do I want to see details or do I want to see summary? Now summary will just give you the account and the summary of the transaction. However, detail will give you each and every single account or each and every single transaction affecting a specific account, obviously the total of that account. Do I want to include tax adjustments? These are the tax adjustments that would have been done by your accountants, auditor, and so forth. Any tax adjustments that have been processed, do you want to see these? Or do you want to also include your tax payments and refunds that have been made previously to your tax authorities and so forth? And then the report is detailed there for you. You can view, print, and email that report, which is quite cool, guys. I mean, I'm very excited about the application. I love talking about it. There's just so much functionality that you can use in the application. The last report that I'm going to take you through briefly is your tax payments and refunds, basically to see what payments and refunds have been processed to the tax authorities. But the last report that I want to take you through is just to cover a very important report, which is part of SARS. If you're in South Africa, the SARS requirements that all your customer documents being emailed need to be encrypted, and you need to have written consent from your customer. But this has been covered previously, so I'm not going to go into any detail here. But basically, the tax audit report. This report is a powerful report that will show you all the customer tax invoices and credit notes that have been emailed to your customers and will show as computer generated, which is a SARS requirement. So by simply selecting that tax report, tax audit report, I specify my date ranges. I specify the date ranges for when I want to see the transactions for. Then I view the report, and if you have got transactions that you have emailed, then it will show you a list of all those invoices, to whom they were emailed to, the date they were emailed, and then you can reprint that invoice or whatever the case is based on what information you want to see, and it will show the invoice as computer generated and that the document is encrypted, which is very important.
Thank you for joining us for this My Business Online webinar. If you found it useful, please visit the Pastel website to find out about future My Business Online webinars or training courses. Alternatively, contact us on sales@pastelmybusiness.co.za.